Charter Local Edition with your host, John MacDonald.
Hello and welcome. We are visiting today with Representative Brad Tschida, who just wrapped up his first legislative session in Montana. Welcome. We appreciate you taking a little time out to visit with us.
Thank you for having me on the show.
So, first-term legislator, give me your thoughts on how the session went. Was it what you expected, a little bit different?
You know, it's hard to qualify what it's like. The best way I could describe it was, it's sort of like cleaning out an animal stall. You got to do it periodically. Nobody wants to do it, but when you're in there with good people that help share that burden and responsibility, it makes it a whole lot easier.
That's an analogy I haven't heard before.
I hadn't either till it popped in my head a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. So tell me about some of the priorities that you had during the session and your successes and failures and frustrations.
Well, I think I didn't come into the session with a lot of priorities, simply because I wanted to learn, I wanted to experience and find out how I could best serve, because that was the moniker that I used when I came in. I'm a firm believer that I didn't want to be a politician. I want to be a public servant, and that was the approach I used. And now it sounds cliche-ish to use that, but you know, my belief is that a politician looks ahead to their next election, a public servant looks ahead to the next generation. And I was looking ahead to what we could do to improve some of the things that we were seeing, the runaway expense growth of government. So my priorities were to try to do what I could to rein that in, but I relied on the expertise and the experience and knowledge of people who had been here before to help guide me through the process and help me understand how I could best be of service, not just to the folks I represent in District 97, but to the entire state.
And you mentioned the public service component to this, but your background, you've had a few careers. You have an interesting one that's listed in your biography in the state book, which is a dairy ingredient marketing. Tell us what that is.
I work for a company called the Milky Way, and essentially what I do is buy and sell truckloads or smaller quantities of dairy ingredients from around the country, whether it's Pennsylvania, Idaho, Washington State, Wisconsin, California, Texas, even into Kentucky. Montana has one of the smallest dairying states, but you know, huge ag state as far as beef cattle goes. So we sell those ingredients to folks who make different food types, whether it's ice cream or additives into cheese or processed cheese, whether it goes into blends, into baking. So we buy and sell truckloads of those ingredients, plus you know, cheese and butter, things of that nature. And we also have a division that does international importing and exporting. So we have a pretty diverse small business in Montana, about a $40 million a year sales business located in Missoula, in a state that doesn't have any dairying, and it's thanks to you know, the ability to use the internet and phones to conduct business throughout the U.S. and the world.
Right. And how does your background in an industry like that help you when you come in as a freshman legislator in Montana?
You know, I think one of the things that helped me out, John, was that it allowed me to kind of understand experiences of people around the country, not just Montana, but you know, different issues that are being faced around our country. But you're dealing with people, and at the end of the day, no matter what business or industry you're in, it's relationship based, whether it's an adversarial relationship or whether it's a cooperative relationship. So I think when you deal with people in those kind of industries, it's helpful to understand where they come from, what their needs and priorities are, and to try to figure out how to best take care of a need that they might have.
And coming up for the interim, this will be your first interim session as well. What do you have on your agenda? What activities are you going to be involved in?
Well, I'm working on the Legislative Finance Committee, and it's comprised of, I believe, 12 members of the House and the Senate, equally divided between the Republicans and Democrats. And essentially, we're looking at the state's finances to find out, you know, what things need to be done, what we need to prioritize. And you know, on the heels of what we just saw with the audit division, that's going to affect us. The fact that there was $1 billion that was not accounted for appropriately in the state's budget, which is basically Governor Bullock's budget. He's going to have to take care of that and explain why he had this fiasco or failure occur, because I mean, the budget director said it's a fluke that it occurred. Well, 125 errors to me is, I'm not an accountant. I have a background in finance, but I know if my wife had 125 errors in a checkbook over a year's time, we'd have to talk about that. So we're looking at the financial matters of the state right now to try to figure out what it is that needs to be done to help right that ship, get the car back on the track.
And so is there an interim study or some interim legislation that's being looked at by the committee at this point?
That remains to be seen. I think there is going to be a recommendation that there be a special session to look into this. Whether that comes to fruition or not, I do not know. But it would be the Finance Committee, I believe, who would recommend that, or may recommend that. And again, being a freshman legislator, I don't want to go too far out on a limb because I'll saw it off behind me. But I think that's sort of the next step to propose a special session and then put together a committee that would take a look at this.
So for people that maybe don't follow the legislature on a daily basis, we have a citizen legislature in the state of Montana. You have a real job when you leave here. What's kind of the impact from a personal level when you come here for essentially 90 days, which becomes about 4 months? How do you balance all of that? The work and your legislative work, your job back home and family, balancing all that?
Well, I'm fortunate that I have a great wife. I've been married almost 34 years, and I think it was hardest on her, and I didn't really fully understand how difficult it might be, her being alone. You know, we live a little bit out of town, so there's always those concerns about her safety and well-being. That was probably the biggest thing. I fortunately worked for a guy who's a great individual who allowed me to take essentially a 4-month sabbatical, and they picked up my work at the office, and then when I came back, I was able to step back into it. But it's difficult. But you know, I found it not to be as draining as some people did. I mean, a lot of people left the session going, I'm tired, I'm worn out. I was kind of energized, and I think it had to do with the great people that I was able to meet and deal with on a daily basis, who helped me, keep my eyes focused on the prize, what it was that we were trying to do as a citizen legislature. And yeah, you're absolutely right. We're unique in the U.S. in that we have a citizen legislature and we meet for 4 months every 2 years. There's no other state that has both those components.
Right.
And I talked to a guy from California the other day who said, we ought to do that down here. He said, that sounds like the right way to do it. And I said, well, go ahead and see where it gets you. I think that'd be a great idea to try to propose down there.
Yeah. Well, it was an interesting session for sure. I've been meeting with and visiting with Representative Brad Tschida. It's been a great interview. I appreciate your time. I'm happy that you're able to take a little time out of your schedule to come and visit with us.
Well, thanks for fitting me in. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Charter Local Edition has been an exclusive presentation of Charter Communications, providing original programming.